What's going on, Elevation Nation? We're back. It is windy in New York City today, up to 50 mile per hour gusts. I almost got blown over this morning going to the gym, which is crazy. I assume DC Sam did not have those winds. And Michael, you're coming in from Houston, right? Did you get those winds as well?
We had a good day today. All good here in Houston.
What's a good day look like in Houston?
Low 60s. I mean, honestly, anything below 100 degrees is a good day in Houston. But when you get those low 60s days, sun's out, all good.
I mean, I'm very jealous of that. I want sun out, low 60s. But I know you guys have brutal summers down in Houston. I
You
know
got to
that's a
get out of
thing.
here. You got to get
Yeah.
out of Houston during the summer.
Well, let's get into it a little bit, Michael. Welcome to Elevation Nation. Sam and I are pumped to have you. You know, obviously we met a couple months back from an introduction from my stepbrother, Mike. So shout out Mike Bass. But tell us a little bit more about yourself, what you're building at your business, who you're about.
Sure. I mean, I think it all started probably when I was 14 years old. I was getting ready to start my freshman year of high school, and I thought I was going into high school 2 days later. Just had returned home from summer camp, and my parents told me that instead I was going to be moving to Italy for a year to live with an Italian family that I'd never met before, didn't speak a word of Italian, had never been to Italy, and that pretty much changed my life path really ever since. I came back, fluent in Italian and had this global experience that I wasn't expecting. At the time, I was pretty upset when I got the news that I was going to move to some, foreign country where they speak a language I didn't know. But long story short on that is it really set me off on this new path and curiosity for different cultures, languages, traveling, and yeah, after college, I knew I wanted to get back over to Italy, and that ultimately led me to Backroads, and I spent 8 years guiding trips for Backroads all around really every region in Italy, and then a little bit in Spain, and then I would spend my winters either in Peru or Patagonia in Argentina, or I would take the winter off and I'd do some traveling, whether it was, camping around New Zealand for 2 months, backpacking Southeast Asia, backpacking South America, did a yoga teacher training in Costa Rica. I would spend some time back home with my family, but the 20s were all about exploring the world, meeting people, having cool experiences. And then I'm giving you the abbreviated version here, so let me know if you want me to expand on anything. But came back to Houston and eventually met my now wife. And so we were in Austin for a year while she was finishing her fellowship. And that was really when I was trying to figure out what my next steps would be and came up with the idea to develop some of my own itineraries and pitch the idea to a GM of a country club here in Houston, a place that I grew up going to and knew a lot of the fitness instructors and a lot of the members there. And that's what jump started Bluestone Travel. And so I came up with the Dolomites itinerary, which was my first launch in the summer of 2022. And the Houstonian put all of my itineraries and information about my trips on the screens throughout the club. They would do an email newsletter blast to the 13,000 members and ultimately led to my first departures. And since then, it's been just a spiral in so many different directions. I've launched four other Bluestone travel trips. So Faroe Islands, Chile, which included the Atacama Desert and Patagonia. And then we did the Cape Town and Botswana, which is coming up soon in a couple months. And the newest trip that's going to be launching is Azores and Madeira this fall. So that kind of gives you the Bluestone travel side of things. I can get into the FROSCH and Chase travel group, and how I've now also fallen into a little bit of a travel advisor role as well, more a traditional travel agent. But yeah, I wanted to see if you.
I
I mean,
mean, it's you gave us a lot of ammunition to go off of here. I want to start, Michael, by first saying incredible. It's a pretty unique story. I hope you know that, and something that I think gives you a lot of perspective. And obviously, Parker and I value travel in other cultures, and we'll get into some of our experiences that is probably a shared experience we've all had. But I want to take it all the way back to what you first started your story with was freshman year, thinking you were about to go to high school in the States and having your parents pull probably the coolest audible of the century. Like, how did they come up with this idea? Was this something that was common in your family or group? Like, where did this stem from? And because I want to know more about that as now Parker's married, we're getting older, thinking about parenthood. What a cool opportunity that your parents gave you.
Yeah, man, I think about this all the time with two little girls wanting to create a similar experience. But, to be fully honest and transparent, I was just not a good kid. I mean, my my grades were fine, but I was always getting out of my seat, not raising my hand, basically like immature young boy all through lower school and middle school. And I think part of the reason, if you really want to get into it, was my mom wanted me to go to a specific private school in Houston. She took me to apply when I was 4 years old, but wanted me to go the following year. They said, I tested at the highest level, I was ready to go, and so they put me into preschool a year early, and I was the youngest kid in my grade. So I think that explains some of the immaturity. And then when it came time to go to high school, they had me in all AP classes because of my grades. They had just taken a certain percentage of the class and put us in the hardest classes. But my mom was thinking, here is the youngest kid in the grade. I was actually at the bottom of that cutoff list, so I was going to be the worst student in all the hardest classes. And she was talking to the advisor and just thinking that this was going to be a complete disaster for me in high school. And the advisor happened to be an Italian American woman who also had a son that was the youngest in his grade. And she had mentioned sending him off to Italy for a year to live with their Italian family. And by chance, that summer, my dad's in the steel business and he buys a lot of steel from a family in Italy. That summer, they had sent their 21-year-old Italian son to come live at our house in Houston to learn our side of the business. So my mom literally left this advisor appointment, which was 2 weeks before I was supposed to start high school, talked to this kid, Carlo, and asked him if, his mom would take me for a year. And she had never met his mom. My dad kind of knew his dad through business, but it was very much a business relationship, not a friendship. And that's what ultimately led to me living, in Lake Como for a year at what used to be the royal family of Milan's summer villa. And it was over the top, like butlers and
It
chefs.
sounds over the top. I mean, it sounds amazing. First of all, you're 15 years old at that time?
Yeah, it's 14. Yeah.
So you step foot, you get off the plane. Like, I don't know if you remember, but like, what's one experience that you remember from that?
I remember it vividly. I mean, they being my parents, had told me that dad would go over with me. If I didn't like it, I could come back. Complete BS. They had pulled me out of high school. They had made arrangements for me to start my freshman year the following year. And there was no coming back. I was going to figure it out one way or another. And yeah, the first or second day I got there, I remember I went to the school. So the mom of the family that I lived with, they funded and basically developed a small private school in town. And she set me up with teachers for reading, writing, speaking. I had 3 or 4 different private teachers every single day. And then I'd be in the classroom for other subjects like English or math or things where I could relate to the kids. And the first or second day I go into this class and, it's, I don't know, 30 or 40 Italian kids. Again, I don't speak a word of Italian. I grew up speaking Spanish, but I still couldn't, communicate at all with these kids. And they put me in front of the class and there's like a little introduction and it just hit me so hard in the face that I was like, here are 40 kids my age that I just can't talk to. And yeah, it probably took 2 or 3 months to actually like being there. I had called home and said, like, I want to come back. You told me if I wanted to come back, I could. But I don't know, they just knew it was going to be okay. And the family that I was with was amazing. And I eventually started playing on a basketball team. And yeah, the experience worked itself out. I made a lot of close friends that I still keep in touch with and see, annually. And it changed my life path for sure.
I know Parker wants to take this in a direction, but I just have to give your parents credit where credit's due. That's not an easy thing, I imagine, to send your kid across the world to go have that experience, but to know that that's what you needed, I think is really impressive. Parker and I just got back from a conference and they had a child psychologist speak, and he pretty much said that parents in today's, generation don't help build resilience for their children. They try to protect their children from any adversity that comes their way because they love them and want a happy, safe, easy path for their kid. And it's making kids, for lack of a better term, that are just soft and like can't deal with challenges that come their way, which life is full of challenges, no matter how many things you get taken care of for you. And so I just want to commend your parents, hopefully realizing like what a cool decision that they gave you.
Thanks, man. Yeah, before you jump in, Parker, because what you just said, Sam, I've been listening. My wife turned me on to this woman, Dr. Becky Harris. She writes a book called Good Inside, and that's exactly what she hits on. It's about like stealing your kids' capabilities when you try to make things a little easier for them versus what you were just saying, which is building resilience. And so I think about it all the time with my girls.
I mean, we could talk a lot about resilience. That's literally what we talk about on every episode. So I know we're going to get into that in just a bit. But Michael, I remember growing up when I was a counselor at my sleepaway camp, one of the campers was from Italy. And his mom was friends with, I guess, the owner. And they said to the kid, you're going to come to this camp in the United States and you're going to learn English. Yeah. And you're going to be immersed in this entire sleepaway camp world, and you're going to figure it out. And as the counselor of this kid, I remember, doesn't know a lot, but he became the most popular kid in the camp by far. So I imagine, you're from America, you're with a bunch of Italian kids. Are you now the most popular person in Lake Como?
Dude, they were like, I would go back and forth sometimes, and like the littlest things, right? Like I would bring gum from the U.S. and they would be like, "This is the best gum ever," or it really didn't matter what I brought, but it was, I think it was the novelty of just like an American kid, and yeah, by the end of it, being able to speak Italian fluently, but also being American, kind of gave me this unique perspective, I guess, that people really, I don't know, attach to.
I'm sure you appreciated it. I'm sure you appreciate it probably a lot more now looking back on it too. And I'm sure the people there too appreciated the experience. So that ends. You come back to the States. You wrap up school. You go to University of Maryland. You graduate. And then you're like, wait, I'm sure I skipped over a lot, but you want to travel. You want to experience the world. Talk us through that ick that you got right after school.
Yeah, and honestly, it started even before that. I mean, when I came back from that experience in Italy, the following summer, I went and lived with a family in Ecuador and spent 2 months there, really just to like get my Spanish back up to where it was. And this is like a 16-year-old me that I was like, yeah, I'm down to go and live with some other random family in some other random country. So I think already at that point, I was curious and wanting different experiences. And then went on to live in Israel with Mike for that year. And as soon as I got to Maryland, the first thing I asked the advisor was just what abroad opportunities are available to me. I want to know, as a freshman, I want to know like what I can possibly do. And I think at the end of Maryland, I think I either had 6 or 7 different transcripts on my resume because I had done a summer in Italy through some other school where I got like 6 credits for volunteering and teaching English. I did a spring break class in the UAE. I did a semester abroad in Prague. I did semester at sea. So I kept like hitting all these different abroad experiences through my college career. And then, yeah, as soon as I finished, I did move to DC it was a little less than a year. The girl that I was dating at the time had already moved and lived there, and that was the main reason for that. But as soon as that ended, I knew I wanted to be traveling again. And I had gone on a backroads trip with my parents in Alaska. And the leader who took us on that trip had said to me, we really need Italian speakers. Italy was their #1 selling country. They just didn't have enough American leaders that spoke Italian. And so she helped me get that job pretty quickly. And at 23, I went off and I started what I thought would be a 2 to 3 year experience while I figured out what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And yeah, dude, 8 years later, still living out of a suitcase, loving it, just tough to get away from that free lifestyle where you really have few items with you and you can go wherever you want, do whatever you want. And I just can't imagine a better way to have spent my 20s.
I think travel brings out a lot in us that we didn't know we had, whether that's overcoming adversity or opening our eyes up to new perspectives. And so I know we just spoke on adversity, so I want to hit on the other one. When Parker and I studied abroad together, it was my first time really being immersed in another culture. We were in Spain. And I remember vividly I'm going to talk a little shit about some of our friends that went over there with us, Parker. Them coming in as like very cocky frat boy American kids. Like, this is our city now. Like, we're taking it over. We're going to party. We're going to do whatever we want. Like, we can speak English. We're not even going to try to speak Spanish because we're Americans. We're the best. We do everything. Like, and I remember just by the end, them having, thank God, changed their entire perspective on a new culture and new people as we became more and more immersed in life in Barcelona. And I think for me, that was one of the biggest takeaways that I had was you grow up, I'm from Chicago, north suburbs of Chicago, Jewish family, in a bubble, went to Maryland, same types of kids, and you think that your way of life is the right way of life. And I think going abroad and seeing how other people live so happily, not wishing they were in America in the suburbs, not longing for something that I had, but loving and thriving in their life. And for me, that really opened my eyes up to different types of ways to live as an adult, to raise my children, of just, there are other ways to be happy. You don't always have to have the American dream or climb the corporate ladder. There are other parts of life that you can enjoy. And so for me, that was the biggest takeaway. And Michael, I guess for you, I'm curious, you've lived and traveled. You're now raising a family of your own. What's the biggest takeaway or lesson that you have from travel itself?
I mean, I think you hit it pretty well. There's so many different things from different cultures that I've already made my own. You know, there are a lot of ways that I feel Italian. There's a lot of European lifestyle norms that I agree with that I don't necessarily think most Americans are even aware of, right? It's hard to hold two different truths at the same time, or even a little nuance. But when you have all of these different perspectives and I guess just exposure to different cultures, you realize there's so many different ways that people live, eat, talk to each other, you know, the list goes on, and you can kind of pick and choose what you want for yourself instead of what you've been pre-wired to believe is the only way to do things.
I mean, you get such a, I mean, to your point, a worldly perspective. I mean, you get to take in all these different experiences and conversations and interactions and then walk away with it. What did I like, enjoy, hate? You know, what made me happy, what made me upset, scared? And you get to kind of pull however you want in one way or the other. I'm like, Michael, you've been all over the world, it seems. Like, you've done it all. You've traveled all over the place. I want to get into this a little bit more around your mindset and how you've done that, because I imagine that you get really attached to some of these places. And when you're living maybe in Lake Como, or you're in Ecuador, or you're in, you know, Alaska, you get attached to the culture, but then you leave. And I'm curious, how do you do that? How do you handle that? I'm sure there's people that you met that you love, and then you're like, you know what, I got to go back home.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot about the experiences I've had, the relationships that I create, and you're right. You know, they serve a purpose and they fit a certain like time and place. But that is the nature of traveling so much. I kind of got used to that in the backroads world. You would make really intense relationships, spend a week with someone, go through like the hardest trip ever with the most demanding guests, or someone would get injured, whatever, and you have this crazy bond, and then maybe you don't see each other for the rest of the season. You meet back up at our staff ride at the end of the year, and you have this great, you know, reunion. And then maybe 2 or 3 years go by and you don't see that person, but you really do value those amazing experiences and relationships that you have with people. And so you just kind of pick up where you left off. I mean, I'm lucky. I feel like I have that in almost every country in Europe. If I wanted to reach out to somebody, there's someone there. Same in South America, maybe not as much in Asia and Africa, but yeah, it's amazing to think about just looking at a map, who I could contact and where, you know, I might be able to stay with certain people around the world. It's something I value, and I've always felt that, like, opposed to acquiring things for deeper satisfaction, I'd rather acquire experiences and relationships, meaningful experiences and relationships.
I think
I feel like what comes with maturity a little bit, you get a little older and you realize that you value that a lot more. I know, Sam, you and I have had that conversation a million times over.
Yeah. I think travel helps push you outside your comfort zone to shift your mindset. And, at Elevation Nation, Michael, Parker and I preach a concept that we call mental fortitude, which we believe is the missing piece that we didn't learn in school and that young people in today's day and age need more than ever. And it's broken down into 3 parts: who you are, yourself, your vision, where you want to go, and your fuel, what drives you. And I think, Parker and I are constantly, as we speak around the country now to high schools and colleges, thinking of ways to bring exercises or questions into the mix to help kids think about those things. And I wish there was a way I could simulate 3 months in a foreign country, because I think that might be the best way to activate mental fortitude, put you in a place where you're uncomfortable, make you think in a different perspective about what your life could look like, and then figuring out what you actually care about. Because I remember sitting on the beach in Barcelona, looking at people in the middle of a workday, playing volleyball and having a glass of wine and going, these people aren't on vacation. These people are just living their life. Like, this is in between meetings for them. What is going on? And having that realization of, what do I want for my life as I start to build it? And so I think, mental fortitude and travel go so hand in hand. And it's why I'm very grateful that I got to, share those experiences with Parker. I think it shaped who we are now and honestly what Elevation Nation is built on.
I love that, man. I feel like I'm constantly evaluating like my vision and how I'm going to achieve that. And a lot of people are, just along for the ride. And no, I'm not knocking that, right? Like, that may be an easier way to go through life, or to each their own. But for me, I want to figure out what I want and how to create that. And I've always felt that way with most of my situations, with Backroads, with now, joining FROSCH, and we can get into that a little bit more. But for me, it's always been, where do I see myself, my family going? And of course, I want to hear from them too, what they want. And then how do I create that for everybody?
So let's talk about that. Where you're at 2025, Michael. Like, let's talk about that vision of where you want to go and you want to bring others along with you.
Yeah. I mean, so as Bluestone Travel grew and I started this loyal following of really clients that would just say, I don't care where we're going. If you're creating a trip there, I'm in. And it's been that way. I mean, there's a solid group of people that I'll pitch a trip to, like, the Faroe Islands. They had never even heard of them, no idea where they are on the map.
Wow.
And before I even talk about it, their deposits are in. And
Wait, where is it?
it's north of the UK. It's technically part of Denmark. It's in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean. It's a group of 18 islands that are most of them connected by either sea tunnels. These are like highways that go under the sea floor, or bridges. And I could get into the Faroe Islands and how it is the best kept travel secret and what's going to happen in the Faroes and how I'm able to help with that. But we don't need to go there yet. Where I wanted to go with this is, I just wanted to continue, to your point, connecting and reconnecting with the places that I had been to, finding new places, sharing them with my clients, and basically creating the most unique remote travel experiences that otherwise can't be duplicated or done yourself, and share those with my network. And so, yeah, I went from having the Dolomites trip to the Chile trip that combined the Atacama Desert and Patagonia, to launching Faroe Islands, to now Africa coming up, to eventually the Azores and Madeira in the fall. And it's been fabulous, right? I get to network with these amazing properties, local guides, restaurants, build my itineraries from scratch. And it's something that's just really fulfilling from a challenge standpoint, where it's always a project, and then sometimes it takes a year, sometimes it takes 2 years. It all comes together. You lead it, you see it all come together. It's incredibly rewarding, and then it ends, and you can continue to offer it, or you can move on to another project. I really like the kind of start and end to the trips that I create. But as a result of all of this, a lot of my clients have been coming to me for travel planning advice to places that maybe I haven't developed myself, and they want help with either just booking flights or a full-blown itinerary with guides and transportation and everything. So that led me to FROSCH, which was started here in Houston. A woman named Edna FROSCH started it in the 70s, sold it to the Liebman family, Jewish family that came from South Africa. And they've just been amazing. They've brought me in like one of their own, and I'm not even a year into it, but they put me on the advisory board. So there's 700 advisors that are under the Chase Travel Group. Chase acquired FROSCH and another company called Valerie Wilson. And there's 12 of us that are on this board that represent the 700 advisors throughout the Chase Travel Group. And it's just opened so many doors for me as far as relationships with hotels, with companies that handle on the ground logistics throughout countries, advisors that have been doing this for decades, that have built teams of 15 to 20 people that are working under them, that are experts in travel agent work. So it's huge. It's opening all kinds of doors. It's allowing me to provide massive value to my clients, and it's also supplementing a lot of my Bluestone travel trips in ways that I just could have never foreseen before joining the group. So yeah, I don't want to keep going here. I mean, I have a lot of visions for how I see it playing out, but that kind of fills you in on the frosh side of things.
I mean, it sounds incredible. I mean, it sounds like a perfect place for you to be. I mean, the relationships that you'll make, the people that you'll be interacting with, the different things you'll learn from other people too from that community. I mean, it sounds incredible. I'm like curious, Michael, too, is, Sam and I, we've done a lot of travel together. Sam and I have been to Colombia. We've been to Asia. We've been to China, Thailand, Vietnam, a bunch of places in
Parker,
Europe.
you can't say a lot when you're talking to Michael, by the way.
I know,
that, right?
I know. Well,
all relative compared to...
relatively
You're
speaking,
well-traveled.
I feel like we're very well-traveled people. Michael, you're like obviously very much like whatever. I mean, you've been able to experience the entire world, which is amazing too. But it's one thing about putting together a great travel itinerary, right? There's beautiful places. People could put, $1 on it and say, hey, I'm going to swipe my credit card. Michael said it's a good place. Then it's a whole nother thing once they get there. So I'm really curious, how are you crafting that elevated experience in obviously a really great place, but there's something about the interactions that people get and the moments that matter that you're helping create that really are the things that get people like, wow, that was an incredible experience, none other.
For sure. I mean, I think there's a couple things, right? Before you even get to the location, there are a lot of advisors that have been doing this for a long time and they have their way of doing things. But I think also part of the reason I was invited to join this board is the on the ground experience, right? I spent 10 years basically guiding myself all throughout Europe and South America, dealing with a lot of high demanding, high expecting clients. And so when you already have that experience, one, you can set expectations or handle certain questions in a way that you're just used to dealing with in person with that type of clientele. And so on the front end, before they even get into the country, you've got that credibility, you've dealt with them in a certain way. And then, yeah, being able to speak the language, for example, if I'm planning a trip in Italy, I'm asking these advisors in their own language how they're handling certain things, right? I could give you just like a very quick example. In Amalfi, most companies or most advisors are probably going to put people in Sorrento because it is the easiest place to access from Naples, and then you day trip to the island of Capri, you day trip along the Amalfi Coast, you day trip to Positano, whatever. But that means thousands of people are doing it because that's the easiest way to do it. And so maybe one way to add value would be to advise people to stay on the island of Capri or maybe up in the town of Ravello that gets really quiet at night. And it's one of the most romantic, magical places in the world when the day trippers aren't there. So you get those early morning hours or late evening hours without the herds of people. And it's not easy for an advisor who's never been there or who doesn't speak the language or really understand the location to suggest that to a company that's handling all the on the ground operations. But there are a lot of times where I've gotten proposals from these companies in Italy and I'm like, what if we did it this way? Or have you heard of this vineyard or this, agriturismo that offers this pasta making class and a really cool lunch experience? And that comes with, just having been there and experiencing it myself. So I would say it's a combination of really understanding the clients and also really understanding the destinations.
I think it's, obviously so important that you keep tying things back to your clients, right? And the value that you give to them. I mean, Parker and I are in consulting. It's all about the value you can give to the people that are hiring you. And so it is blatantly obvious that you truly care about the people that have hired you, your clients, and trying to get them a unique experience. But I want to pivot us to what I would say are probably even more important clients in your life, which are your girls now, right? And you trying to raise them. And so I ask you this because freedom has been such an important part of why people travel. The ability to not be tied down, to not have many things, to go where you want to go and kind of create that vision for yourself as you travel. That has obviously changed for you as you've had new priorities in your life. How have you balanced that itch and desire to want to be free and still have that travel bug in you with wanting to also kind of set up some roots for yourself and your family?
Yeah, I think about it a lot. It's evolved over the last couple years, especially now with our second, who's only about 5 months old. So it's always a discussion, right? It starts with, my wife and I. It's usually me saying, all right, I've got this idea. And, it's a very carefully delivered message, and the timing and usually comes after a nice dinner or at a nice dinner. So
Taking
yeah.
tips, by the way. I'm newly married. I'm going on.
Parker, write this
my
down,
1 year
buddy.
Anniversary. I know. I got a podcast for that, Sam. It's all recorded now.
Dude, timing is everything, right? But fortunately, Melissa's incredibly supportive, understanding, excited about what I'm building. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to be gone that many months out of the year because I just love being around my girls. But I also still have this same desire that I had when I was living out of a suitcase. I don't need it to be on that level where I can just pick up and go wherever I want, whenever I want. But yeah, I mean, just looking at 2025, I'd probably will be traveling a total of 2 to 2.5 months if you add it all up together over 7 or 8 different trips, most of them international, but they usually come in 10 to 14 day spurts. And we have a lot of support. Both grandparents are here in Houston, and we have, all the childcare help that we need. So we're lucky in that regard. And it's always just about figuring it out, setting it up, figuring it out, making sure Melissa feels like she's got everything she needs. And she's a doctor. She's also, working almost full time. And so there's a lot of moving pieces that go into this, but I think another important thing is to make sure that, when I have something really exciting, like we're looking at Antarctica as our next departure, that she gets to join that, right? That's something that's really high on her list. Or when I went to Bhutan a couple years ago, we met in Nepal. Wow. We did a really cool hike around the Himalayas and comboed it with a hair conference that she was doing in Delhi, and spent some time in India. So, it's always like figuring out also how to make it work for her, for my family. But it's a great question. I love it.
I'd just like to say before Parker jumps in, I don't have a wife. I'm single. Your guys' relationship, that's what I want for my life. I want to travel the world, support each other, go to conferences around the world. So incredible job. I'll be texting you for some dating advice as well. So.
Well, I'm sure you're waiting for the girls to get older so you can travel
True.
with them.
Dude, I've got so many dreams about this.
Yeah.
I've already been incepting Melissa's mind with this. It's called world schooling, where you take a full year off and you teach your kids.
Someone who did this.
Yeah. So we'll see.
We met someone at our company who is like the head of real estate at our firm, and he's lived out of an RV with his family for what, Sam, is it like 5 years now?
Amazing.
And just they homeschool the kids, and the kids have a worldly experience, and they just drive. They'll say, hey, we're gonna hang here for a month, or they end up being there for 6 months if they like it. And this guy's the head of real estate at a massive corporate company. Like, you can make it work.
It's awesome.
Crazy. All right. Usually we go with 3 rapid fires, but I'm already thinking of other rapid fires I want to ask. This is the next section of the podcast. We're going to ask you questions. Sometimes they, are not rapid. Sometimes they will be rapid, but let's go for rapid. All right, Michael, if you could pull one thing that you've learned from your worldly experience and embed that into American culture, what would it be? Or maybe I'll pick a place or something to help you out.
No, I would just say there are other ways to do things.
Amen.
I mean, it's more of like a general outlook on life, right? It just there are different opinions, different ways to do things. So food, you know, amount of space you need in your home, it relates across the board.
Yeah. People can have other perspectives on how they want to live. All right. Next rapid fire. I am the food guy when Parker and I travel. Parker's the history guy. He does the facts. I do the food. What is a number one meal that comes to mind? A food that you had in all your travels that just you still dream about?
I would piece together a few different courses
Please
from
do. I'm hungry. Let's do it.
mainly restaurants in Italy. There's a place on the Ligurian coast in a town called Sestri Levante that just had the most unbelievable, very simple tuna tartare I think I've ever had. That stands out to me. Um, there is a lemon pesto pasta in the town of Amalfi, handmade pasta. It's this crazy combination of lemon and pesto. Definitely a standout. I like my steaks here in Houston, so I'd either go with a Pappas Steakhouse filet, maybe close with a Churrasco's Tres Leches dessert, but you know.
It sounds like a dream meal. Okay. I'm in. I love it.
That sounds great. All right, next one. You've been to a lot of places. What's a place you haven't been that you're dying to go to?
Mongolia.
Why?
I just keep reading about it. I keep hearing about. I'm attracted to these places like the Faroe Islands that are a little under the radar that people don't know much about that have some sense of adventure. It just looks like it has a bunch of diversity, natural diversity. So that's high, very high. I also talked to someone who's been to 100 plus countries, and she said Mongolia was at the top of her list for like most underrated, unexpected experience.
All right. Parker, we might have to add it to the list here. We'll see.
I love Asia, dude.
I know. We had a great time, man.
Dude, I'm already telling JJ like our next trip, we're going back.
You're going back to Asia?
We went to Singapore and Bali for our honeymoon, Michael.
Awesome.
And like it was so amazing. Just everything about it. Oh my god.
It's a beautiful, beautiful area. All right. Our last rapid fire. So when Parker and I went backpacking through Southeast Asia, I bought a Kindle so that I could read when we were on the trains. Parker still makes fun of me to this day because, as you can see, he's a physical book guy with his bookshelf, and he makes fun of me that I have a Kindle. But I want to ask you, Michael, do you have a book recommendation for Parker and myself?
I'm big on. Does it have to be travel?
No. Any book that you think we should read?
I'll give you a couple because we were talking about the resiliency, and I'm now re-listening to Good Inside, and she just came out on Tim Ferriss's podcast, but Becky Harris about parenting, and it really applies to a lot of life. I think I would put it at the top of my list. I also really like Kevin Kelly, who's this great world traveler. It's a very short. I think it's on Audible, but you could also get the actual physical book if you're a physical book guy. It's called something like Excellent Advice for Living, like Things I Wish I Knew Earlier or something. He's one of the most interesting people in the world.
This is perfect because I need some new books right now. So
It's 24 pages though. You got to read every word with like, unless I'm looking at the wrong thing.
It's yeah. I think the audiobook was like an hour long.
Oh wow.
So it's yeah. I wouldn't say it's a book, but a lot of gems in there.
Have you read The Geography of Bliss?
No. Like
Someone
the sound of
recommended it
though.
to me. I feel like you're going to write a book one day, Michael. I will say. And I'm surprised if you haven't already started or not. Maybe you have. But this guy wrote a book about his search for the happiest place in the world. And it's like a recount of all of his travel and why he talks about Bhutan. And that's how I know about Bhutan and learn about Bhutan. It's a great book. We have your address now, so we'll send it your way. How about that?
There we go. Love it.
Love it.
Thanks, man. I'm excited to talk more about storytelling, and I do not like writing. It just does not come naturally to me. But I like what you guys are doing, and my wife and I, one of the things we do every 3 to 6 months is we just record an audio note about what's going on in our lives, what we're dealing with as parents. You know, we've done it ever since we started a RV road trip right after we got engaged, and we've just continued it through our children being born. So I think it's something that I do want to do. I just haven't figured out the right way.
I mean, bro, I would follow whatever you're putting out into the world, if it is a TikTok, if it is LinkedIn writing, if it's a podcast. It sounds like you're already recording audio. I mean, dude, we could talk offline. I mean, there's a lot there. I will say the accountability piece is hard. Holding yourself up to accountable to do it. All right, Michael, last question. We were talking a little bit about it earlier today. It's the mental motto. Sam and I are on a mission to help 1 million people get a mental motto. That is a phrase, a quote, a slogan that they live their life by so that they're reminded of their mental fortitude when they go out and want to elevate and conquer the real world. So, obviously, we're very curious, Michael. What's your mental motto?
Create the life you want to live.
Talk us through it. Let's hear why.
I mean, I just feel passionate about always evaluating where you're at and where you want to be going and what steps need to be taken to get there. To me, it's that simple, right? If you don't like something that you're doing, make a switch. I mean, if you don't mind, like I'll go off on a little tangent here. It's a little personal. I haven't shared it on a public forum like this, but I'm pretty open with most of my family and friends. And I had started the MBA program at Rice for also like simultaneously launching Bluestone Travel. I just didn't know what momentum I was going to be getting. And it didn't take me long. It was 2 weeks at Rice where I was like, I just don't know if this is the right move for me. The time commitment, the amount of work, I already didn't like school. And I was excited about what was potentially going to be happening with Bluestone Travel, even though at that point I hadn't really sold anything yet. Yeah, there was a moment where, my wife and I were pregnant. We were expecting our first child, and she was 22 weeks, and we ended up learning that we were gonna lose that baby. And this was a time that, right now I look back on it and I think it was also a very pivotal moment for me. And to be fully open, like as sad and as hard as that experience was, and we dealt with it very differently, there was a moment in the delivery room where I knew that we were going to lose this baby, and I started going off on this incredible, like positive mindset of how I was going to use this terrible situation to change my life for the better. And it involved pulling out of the MBA program and starting, 100% focus on Bluestone Travel. And at that time in my life, I had just finished traveling for basically a decade. I'm now married, wanting to start a family. I'm living in a house with a closet. Like all of these things are different to what I knew. And then you throw in MBA school that takes up all of your time. And I just felt like things were really starting to close in on me, and I didn't like where I was at. And in that moment, that really like sad moment, I was like, this is it. Like I'm making this switch. I'm gonna put all my attention towards something that I love. I don't need to do like what you're supposed to do, which is go to MBA school, get a real job or whatever. And yeah, it was a big, big thing. And the other part of this was I knew that we would one day have children, and we would never be able to imagine, or I shouldn't say I knew, but I hoped that one day we would have children, and whatever children we ended up with, we would never be able to imagine anything different. And so those thoughts just kind of kept me like positive and thinking that I will eventually create the life that I want for myself, and to make a switch, right? Easier said than done, but if you don't like what you're doing or you're unhappy, like figure out a way to do something different.
I love it. I appreciate you opening up with us and getting vulnerable. And obviously it's something Parker and I love to do on the podcast. And I think it's those moments of reflection and vulnerability that force our brains outside of their comfort zone and to make decisions about the life we want to create. And so I'm very grateful that you came on here and shared your story with all of us. I wasn't kidding. Like, you and your wife and how you guys go about life is inspiring to me. And I know Parker is trying to live a similar life with his wife. And I just, I'm very excited for you and all the things that you're doing in your world, and very honored that we got to welcome you to the nation today.
Thanks, man. It's great talking to both of you. I enjoyed it.
It was a fun 45 minutes and inspiring one. I'm feeling amped up, honestly, Michael. And I think you need to start some type of a podcast or something. I don't know. But we're going to about talk about this when I hit end. Until next week, man. Elevation Nation.
Peace.
Peace.